Why, hello everybody. Once again, I'm sitting on a Washington beach here to talk to you about psychedelics. In today's video, what I want to talk about in particular are just how fundamentally psilocybin and LSD can change the way that you perceive the world. Now, these are extremely powerful psychedelics that have many cliches and stigmas attached to them, but I hope to go through some of those cliches in today's video and maybe demystify some of the things that people who have done high doses of these things have said. And so let's just go down a list of some of the things I've written down here. I think the best way to start talking about the first complete shift in the way that I view reality is by talking about a common cliche that many people who have taken psychedelics have. And that cliche is they're looking at their hand, they're looking at their sweatpants, they're looking at something extremely simple for an ungodly amount of time. And this looks extremely strange to the viewer who is not on a psychedelic. But I think that's a good segue into talking about the first shift that has happened to those people. So the first and one of the most interesting shifts in my perspective since taking psychedelics is noticing that absolutely every system, every object, anything that you look at is infinitely complex. It is very easy to get stuck in the day-to-day trap of seeing a leaf as just a leaf or seeing an object as just an object. But what psychedelics teach you fundamentally is that that's just based on your focus. If you were to focus on that leaf, such as with a microscope or an electron microscope, you would find that increasing levels of complexity continue to emerge. When you take psychedelics, you are immersed in a world of infinite complexity. And it is not that that world is false, it is actually that you are realizing that infinite complexity is all around you. So when somebody is staring at their hand on psychedelics, when somebody is looking at their sweatpants, it is not some type of delirious motion to focus on something. What it is, in fact, is the subtle noticing that everything has immense detail, and that you can actually increase your level of focus to study the detail of that object. And so with that, let's go into the next thing. So the next fundamental shift that I've had in the way that I perceive the world actually somewhat piggybacks off the last idea. Something happens after you realize that us as humans are just completely embedded in a world of infinite complexity. And that is something that I call the grand leveling effect. It's realizing that actually most humans are just about the same. Your notions of hierarchy and your notions of authority are completely culturally constructed and not all that well founded. And so what happens when you have the grand leveling effect is essentially realizing that, hey, that guy probably doesn't know much more than I do. That person very likely is just as confused about the fundamental nature of our reality as I am. And so what stems from the grand leveling effect is sometimes dangerous consequences where you almost can't take any authority whatsoever very seriously. The reason that the grand leveling effect is a nightmare for civilizations or nation states is because all of a sudden that judge and that police officer no longer seems like something holier than thou. It actually seems a lot more like a bipedal ape wearing a costume. Now, before I took psychedelics and I looked at a judge, I saw a symbolic power of authority. I saw something that's almost untouchable. That person is different than me. Now, after doing quite a lot of mushrooms, what I essentially see is a bipedal ape wearing a dress and some type of strange hammer as they make mouth noises and send people to a metal box. And I think that might be a good description of what exactly the leveling effect can do. It can make it extremely hard to take anybody, even if they rightfully deserve it, seriously. And so that's certainly something to consider that may shift in the way that you perceive the world. The next fundamental shift in the way that I've perceived the world comes from a lot of my high-dose psilocybin experiences, and that is the realization that you are actually no different than the first man or the first woman. You are the same anatomical being that our ancestors were 200,000 years ago. And the ramifications of that are that your needs are the same. Your needs, your fundamental needs, are 200,000 years old. And so a revelation that often comes during heavy psychedelic trips is the need for the basics, the need for family, the need for friends, the need for tribal integration and also usefulness to the tribe. I understand so much deeper now after doing high doses of psilocybin, the actual reality that you need to act in a way like you're something from 200,000 years ago. because you have not changed all that much. It's easy to see our modern goals and our modern context and some of the more flashy things that we would like to obtain, but let's remember where we come from and that we have not changed that much since then. I have taken honestly extreme value from contemplation of ancestors on psychedelics. It is something that I highly recommend that anybody considering getting into the practice of doing psychedelics does. Reflect deeply on your role in history and the lineage of people that have gotten you to where you are, because modern goals are extremely unlikely to satisfy a primal being, and you are a primal being. This next perspective shift that I've experienced is definitely one of the more noticeable ones to probably friends and family. And that is that a former linguistic toolkit that I had, which was very materialistic and very, you could say, stringently atheist in its nature, has been completely swapped with a deep metaphorical and symbolic vocabulary. One thing that psychedelics will drill into you is the importance of symbolism. I never understood just how important symbolism was until I stripped my psyche bare and noticed that that was all that was left. When you notice that, you realize that there is something deep. There is a deep substrate underneath the psyche that is not linguistically based. And when you realize that there's a region of the brain that is not linguistically based, you realize that you need new tools to describe those things. And so I think here we can address another common cliche of people who do mushrooms and LSD in high doses. And that is that often people will come away saying words that just sound dramatic. Words like sacred, words like divine, you know exactly the type of words that I'm talking about. Those words are being used because other words do not fit. We are being forced to use the most powerful language that we have, which is essentially ancient biblical language or ancient religious language in general. And so the next time somebody describes their experience to you as divine or sacred, don't think that they're trying to make it more than it was. Understand that they're at the very limit of their ability to linguistically describe what happened, and so they've just retreated to using the most powerful words possible. And so that's definitely something you want to consider about how your perspective might change after doing high doses of psychedelics. Another realization that stems from this symbolic mindset is an understanding that the underworld that was referenced in ancient times, the place where scary gods can punish you and where the uncertain lurked, is a real place. It's a real place because in our day-to-day activities, we are filtering out so much. We are filtering out almost everything. But when psychedelics increase that perception, this, so to speak, underworld completely shows its face. And it comes after you in the most personal and intimate way possible. And so what these ancient humans are talking about is not necessarily literal, but it is a deep underlayer to the mind that can present itself in a very malicious form. And so I think that might be something to consider about how you may perceive terms like the underworld after you have done high doses of psychedelics. The next and somewhat similar fundamental shift in my perspective is a deep appreciation for the meaning of patterns. Patterns before I did psychedelics were math. Patterns were unimportant, related phenomena that really did not matter whatsoever. After doing psychedelics, I understand that the universe at its deepest level is patterns. And I'm of course willing to be open-minded to this, but it seems so clear that everything can fundamentally be described as a pattern. So one example of a way you can describe yourself as a pattern is to understand that you yourself are a pattern of atoms that have arranged themselves to know that they are atoms. And so psychedelics really hit this over the head, and things can get really strange really fast. Because psychedelics can place so much emphasis and focus on patterns that you are noticing, you start to realize that you yourself are a pattern interacting with other patterns. And so that leads to a lot of questions like, what type of pattern do I want to be? What do I want to represent in this world? What forms do I want to bring into being? This realization that everything is fundamentally patterns is both cliche and deeply true. And so you can see how that's a bit of a problem for people in the psychedelic community. It's absolutely true to say that you are a pattern interacting with other patterns. When hippies say it's all about the vibration, it's all about the frequency, what they're saying is it's all about the pattern, because a vibration is a pattern. And so you can see that my thought process has become somewhat hyper-obsessed with noticing patterns between things. And I understand that this can go awry, this can cause things to not be perceived in a correct way, but This deep feeling that my entire life now is composed of interacting patterns is something that has not gone away whatsoever since taking psychedelics. It is something that is basically embedded in my life now. I'm unable to see life as something different than a complex set of patterns stacking on top of each other that I would ideally like to synchronize and make harmonious. And maybe everybody else won't come away with that conclusion, but I can absolutely tell you that things like body posture, things like symmetry, things that relate to stacked patterns that may have meaning are now the prime attention in my life. I don't know why, but there's something about the interaction of conscious matter with patterns that we should always think about. The next fundamental shift in the way that I have perceived the world since taking these substances is understanding that I am in no way whatsoever separate from nature. I think there's a default human effect that happens sometimes where we notice that nature seems to look like the background. Animals seem to be away from us, plants seem to be things that we see, and altogether we seem to be things that are not nature walking around in nature. But luckily, something that I absolutely enjoy about psilocybin is that it immerses you with nature. It reminds you that actually you're embedded with the rest of these organisms in one complete substrate. Everything that exists, living and non-living, is an extension of nature. And this is not an idea that comes to you on psychedelics. This is a deep feeling. This is an intuition. And fundamentally, a lot of the ways that we rationalize things anyway are intuitions. And so I am extremely inclined to believe that I should follow this intuition, that I should live with, not against nature. And this is something that actually I believe many people who have taken psychedelics said. Nature is a very, very common theme of people who do high doses of these substances. So I'll just tell you, absolutely prepare for your relationship with nature to change if it is currently not intimate. All right, well, I think that's going to bring a close to some of the fundamental shifts in my perspective since taking high doses of psychedelics, and I just have a few things to say before I go. First of all, thank you guys for 15,000 subscribers. I absolutely can't believe it. That's what, a small nation state at this point? The next thing I want to do is advertise my Discord, a community of 1,000 plus psychonauts just waiting to have an awesome conversation with you. Head down in the description below to see that. I also want to talk about my Amazon affiliate link. The holidays are coming, and that is absolutely the best way to support me for free. I appreciate anybody that decides to do that. Finally, I want to thank all of my Patreon subscribers. You guys are incredible, and I'm so honored that you would even consider to contribute to me. To think that I have some type of potential that you're interested in means the world to me. And so I want to name them here. Yehuda, Petscher, Dylan Duryee, known as Joseph on our Discord, Leo Avila, Ethan Beitel, Damian Scoose, Austin, the Steed in the Discord, Andrew Dowling, Jason Burns, and Devin Hall. I would be nothing without you guys, and thank you so much for your Patreon contributions. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.